Question: what happens when your last cult gets shut down? The answer? You make your own. Let me describe the situation. This has been an unconventional series of RPG horror stories, to be sure, following the line of my life more than any logic or reason. Yet another thread joins them all. What happens when the role-playing most disastrously invades real life, as life becomes the game, and as the game becomes life? A cautious series about the need for grounded barriers, and to seek out better company, for all nerds and gamers to watch out for each other, and to be cautious of the warning signs of cult-like behavior in their fellow hobbyists, and to love one another. Always look after one another. What is there left to say? Not much. I am enveloped by so much catharsis that to continue the story seems almost arbitrary, except to tie off loose ends. Writing the conclusion to part 4 actually brought me to tears. I've never affected myself by my own writing like that before, but the story isn't done. I know how it all ends, but I am afraid of what we will find along the way. Hold my hand, dear reader, and let us find out together. The clan is no more. I can't speak to the truth of the allegations. I wasn't there. But what was alleged in the subsequent criminal trial was that a girl who was peripherally involved in the clan bought drugs from Trent and his friends on credit, but later refused to pay for them, so they burnt down her parents' house. No one was hurt, not that I know of, but another guy loosely associated with Trent's group spoke in open court about how we were a Satanist gang that drank blood and practiced witchcraft. However, key claims made by the prosecution were found to be untrue, so the case was dropped. Nonetheless, my school became hypervigilant for a piece of red cloth tied around the wrist, identified in the trial as the clan's identifying gang sign. If anyone was seen wearing it or associating with a known clan member, the school would dig through their records until an excuse to expel them was found. I flew under the radar, but Trent was expelled literally weeks before graduation. Richard was first expelled, then reinstated, apparently because the principal had a crush on his mother. It was a peculiar purgatory. Enter Leo. Though to be precise, Leo had been in the story since the beginning. When I first came to that school, he saw me reading my 2nd edition Dungeon Master's Guide and bonded with me over D&D. Had I not been under Richard's sway, we would have become fast friends, but such as it was, I kept him at arm's length. I brought Leo into my games with Dante and Will, and he was present for many of the stories I have told here. One day at school before the second cult, Leo found Richard directing some boys to beat me with metal chair legs after cornering me behind the school auditorium. He waded into the fray like a hero and dragged me to the school office to report the incident. Nothing came of it. I downplayed the event to not get Richard in trouble, and the school's attitude was largely that bullies were the real victims. I should be grateful my life wasn't so miserable that I should bully people. But my point is that Leo is a good guy. Leo was Neville Longbottom, ever present in the background, but isn't until the final chapter when you discover that he, and not that Harry Potter brat, was the hero of the story all along. Back to the present. With the clan behind us, it was just me and Richard again. I didn't want to go back to how it was before, so I decided we should move forward and start our own cult. First in my crosshairs was Leo. I invited him over and told him everything. The end of the world, vampires, magic, demons, the whole shebang. He asked a lot of questions about Richard, our relationship, and how I came to believe these things. Then he went home and mulled it over for a few days before giving me his answer. This is where the story gets really crazy. Leo did exactly what any gamer would do when encountering an in-depth roleplay. He rolled up a character and joined in. Over many days and nights, we engaged in cooperative storytelling, feeding off one another's narratives through the locus of my desire to believe. He told me that he possessed the memories of an incredibly powerful wizard-like being from another dimension, that I had awoken these memories in him, and that he intended to share all his knowledge and power with me. As if by providence, my third cult fell right into my lap, with me and Leo on top, and Richard beneath. Leo described to me years later how vulnerable he found me, how absolute my faith in my friends was as to believe anything they told me, how obstinate my belief, not to defend my own ego, but to deny that my friends were liars, how he saw those qualities he admired so thoroughly exploited by Richard's opportunism, how I had given up myself willingly so easily. A nuanced contradiction unfolded. On one hand, Leo was filled with compassion for me and hatred for Richard. On the other, he decided to exploit me in the same manner, reasoning it as a means to an end, to help me break free. His half-baked plan held two objectives in mind: to play along with my delusion, with the aim of giving me confidence and power over my life through his supposed teachings, and secondly, to punish Richard and make him suffer. So no matter how much I tried to defer to Leo as my new cult leader, he made sure I was always elevated. I became the head of our new cult. Though I deferred to Leo, Leo made sure to always defer to me in return, and to make sure I knew I was in charge, and that Richard always knew he was on the bottom. The Columbine school shooting happened around this time, and even in Australia, reshaped schools' attitude to security. A rumor started to circulate that I was planning a copycat shooting, and people stopped bullying me and started to fear me. I was delighted. As far as I was concerned, this was an admission of guilt. If I were capable of mass murder, it meant my bullies knew what they were doing was wrong all along. That boys will be boys was always meaningless. Plus, I could use this rumor to enhance my edgelord LARP, to build more walls around myself that no one could hurt me ever again. While Leo didn't believe the rumors that I was a future school shooter, he believed me when I said my life was suffering, and he often asked what he could do to ease my burden. So I hatched an immoral plan to rid myself of Happy, who still used me for emotional support with the same frequency and intensity despite our breaking up. I rang her up and was very cruel to her, just enough to make her start to have a breakdown. Leo called her directly after, being coached by me on what to say, causing her to latch onto him and leave me alone. It worked. Cowardly, cruel, and myopic as it was, it worked. But Leo had no idea what he had gotten himself into, and was woefully unprepared to play such a multi-layered role-playing game, where expertise lays with locking your real self up in a box and throwing away the key. I don't know what real damage I caused him by dragging him into this world, but he admitted there were times he felt himself start to believe in our fiction. Indeed, the bond between us was real. One day, I told him to cut his hand, and he did so without question. Then I cut my own, and we clasped them together, swearing we were blood brothers. Even if magic is not real, ritual is life-defining. These moments affected Leo for life, as they affected me. The new magic we tried to forge was dangerous, even without a belief in the supernatural. We acted out summoning demons and binding them to our wills. It was a roleplay of strength, the quality he believed would give me back my power. We called it ego, though perhaps toxic masculinity would be a better term. A mix of unshakable self-certainty, animal dominance narratives, and righteous rage. The latter spoke to me most of all, and my depression was replaced by fury. While that fire overwhelmed every other emotion and saw me retreat further into myself, it gave me an overwhelming indifference where suddenly nothing mattered, and I was free to walk away from everything, the good and the bad alike. However misguided and long-term damaging his amateur therapy roleplay turned out to be, it just was a means to an end. To raise every structure and burn every bridge. Every day, I actively tried to destroy the person I had become a little more, until I felt like there was nothing left. The last time I spoke to Happy, she had just gotten pregnant and wanted me to be the godfather. At first, she claimed to not know who the father was, even after the doctor narrowed conception down to a single day. Then she claimed Leo was the father, that he had tied her up and had his way with her inside a church. Though many of the details didn't add up, I had no desire to choose who to believe, so I broke off all contact with them both. I channeled all my rage to look Leo in the eye, called him ignorant, and walked out of his life. This affected him deeply. He looked at himself in the mirror and realized he was ignorant. So he set out to see the world and improve himself. Today, he is an engineer, as well as an instructor at our old jiu-jitsu school, and he is doing very well. We reconnected eventually, and he was very concerned about the damage he might have done to me. Years later, I told Leo about Happy's accusations, and it visibly shook him. He told me she continued to ring him for emotional support for several years after the events of this story. He told me that they had never been together, and she had never raised the notion of the child being his even after it was born. It seems she had never repeated the accusation to anyone. That story was for me and me alone. The last I heard, Happy had 3 kids to 3 different fathers, and was showing the visible signs of hard drug addiction. No matter my feelings about her, I can't deny her story is an absolute tragedy, and no one in her life, myself included, was helping her get the help she needed. The last I saw Church, she was a single mother. She had a baby to a guy who died of an overdose shortly afterwards. The child was maybe 5, waving at a train I was on as it passed the station. Church yanked back the little girl's arm angrily and wagged a finger in her face, chastising her for waving. I felt really bad for the kid. Amazingly, I'm friends with Trent to this day. I helped him get over his addiction to hard drugs by introducing him to video gaming. I helped finance his first Xbox console, then played Halo with him almost every day for several years. We were both getting over very traumatic and damaging experiences, and it was cathartic to just sit side by side on a couch and know the other was there. But there was no pressure to talk. Our kill count was the only communication we needed. We each found our own way to move on, but we still don't talk about those days. The second to last time I saw Richard, he came over my house around the time I cut off contact with Leo and Happy. I came out of my room with a Japanese wooden sword in my hand, half ready to use it, and told him in no uncertain terms we were not friends. Then I went back to my room and shut the door. He wandered around my house like a lost puppy trying to talk to my siblings, before walking out of my life. The last time I saw Richard, he was at a market day at my university. My rage bubbled up as I counted the steps between us, while visualizing punching him in the throat, but then remembered he had no power over me and kept walking. What happened to me? I had cut myself off from everyone, but the memory remained. I remember one day I developed a headache and found myself having to decide whether to drink some water and have a lie down, or whether to draw a magic circle and prepare for psychic combat with the demon that was attacking me. I chose to drink some water and lie down. Not because I didn't believe in demons, I had no idea what I believed, but because I was emotionally exhausted and couldn't be bothered. I found a lot of solace in being under the influence. If I was out of my mind, I didn't have to worry about whether my experiences were real. It was somehow comforting to know it was just the drugs. Eventually, the drugs controlled my life, and combined with having long since given up any hope of a future, I wasted away. I was so skinny my face looked like a skull. I remember not eating for days on end, then feeling sick after a single mouthful. Anything would set me off into a depressive state, and I was very difficult to be around. Eventually, I got into a medieval reenactment hobby, and I immediately fell in love with history. It was 3 things I was great at: escaping reality, role-playing, and obsessing over hobbies. I got fitter in order to wear 45 kilograms of 14th century plate armor while swinging a sword, and I started to make friends again. I threw myself into historical research, and later went to university and got my degree in medieval history. I had been estranged from my family for so long that the only way I knew how to reconnect was to run a D&D game for my little brother and sister. The game lasted years, taking them from 1st to 15th level. This was how I picked up the DM screen for good, and the world I created with them is the one I still run to this day, with each party adding to the rich lore. 20 years have passed in real life since my progress as a human being was temporarily halted, and 100 years in the world I created. Haunted by the memory of all the promise I showed as a child, I worked menial, minimum wage jobs without a purpose. Then, a kid in America shot up his campus, blaming the girls who didn't date him. I was shocked, because in his video manifesto, I saw myself, and I saw Richard. It was in his false bravado eyes, and in his faltering, affected laugh by which he tried to brush off his plan as a thing of amusement to his emotionless mask. I realized that but for a few chances of fate, there went myself, and that realization shook me to my core. I became political, and I began to obsess over writing. I rewrote the same essay over and over for 3 years, trying to find my voice, that I might somehow speak to people like myself, before they met their own Richard in a dark and dirty subreddit. It became an obsession, even enrolling back at university to do a few semesters improving my writing skills. There, as a mature-aged student, I became very lonely and self-isolated again. So I did the one thing that has always made things better. I ran a D&D game. My players just hit level 8 last week, and it is the best campaign I have ever run. I feel better than I've ever felt, and very socially satisfied. I am making stories. I am with my own kind, and I am writing better than I have ever written before. None of my stories, however, even come close to the strangeness that is the line of my life. So I don't blame you, dear reader, if you chalk this up to pointless karma farming, attention-seeking, social justice warrior brainwashing, or any homegrown internet term for something intended to evoke positivity. It's pointless for me to say every word of it is true, not just because everyone chooses what to believe for themselves, but because I'm not sure I even believe in truth, at least not in the concrete sense. But there is one lie I must confess, that I think some of you have figured it out. That this is not a D&D horror story per se. This is a horror story, and this is a story about D&D, featuring some horrible D&D along the way. But the game itself always manages to soar to new heights, clear of the burdening muck below. This is a story of how D&D beats the horror. We all know the saying, no D&D is better than bad D&D. But I want to propose a new saying. Bad D&D cannot ruin good D&D. It's like life. Nothing will ever erase the bad, but the bad prepares us to appreciate the good more intensely than anyone who has ever struggled could know. Bad D&D can make us walk away, close ourselves off from the possibilities, but it cannot diminish good experiences if we give them a chance, and if we do, they will live on forever within our hearts and memories. I promise you, it gets better. Good D&D wins every time. I love you all, and thank you for coming with me on this journey. Forever DM, out. Many people do not believe in this story, but trust me, I could tell you some crazy stories from my own life that you wouldn't believe. I truly believe in the phrase, truth is stranger than fiction. OP has been through a lot, and it is frankly very tough to admit to all the crazy stuff that just happened. We all make bad decisions when we are young, but this is pretty extreme. OP being able to turn his life around from all of this is nothing short of a miracle. Which, again, is hard to believe in, but I mean, that's what we all expect when we listen to any story. OP's story sheds light on some topics that I've never really thought about before, and I hope it made you think outside the realm of reality for a little bit. What do you all think about this series overall?